I never thought you'd be so natural. It's a comment I've heard repeatedly, usually when someone meets me for the first time. It's always said in surprise, and it's a fantastic example of how society views people like me. And that's because there's an expectation that we are not natural, a belief that we are completely different to everyone else. Partly, that's because most people don't know any openly transgender people, those of us who have a mismatch between our identities and our sex. But we have existed for as long as there have been people, part of the wonderful natural diversity of the human race. Here in the UK, that means there are around 500,000 transgender people, about 5.5 times the population of Bath, or the entire population of Bristol. About half of us are trans men and trans women in roughly equal proportion. And about half of us are non-binary, a multitude of genders that don't fit neatly or at all into the boxes marked man or woman. That's a lot of people, but we are rarely described or treated as such. Quite often, you'll see us called a lobby or an ideology. Activists, extremists, bullies, cheats, or predators, if they're feeling polite. And most of what you'll see about us is misinformation, frequently originating in far-right conspiracy theories, lies used to oppose our very existence in an attempt to eliminate us completely from society. It's a process called dehumanization, defined as depriving a person or a group of positive human qualities. And it's done to justify behaviours that you would otherwise recognise as unfair, unethical, or immoral. And every minority group has to deal with it every single day, commonly appearing as indifference and intolerance. Indifference is usually systemic, and it is present in every facet of UK society. For transgender people, it comes from the unquestioned assumption that the boxes marked man and woman apply to everyone. And it manifests as a lack of recognition. I use the gender-neutral title mix, which has been around since 1977. And a while ago, I needed some new glasses. So off I went to the opticians. And while registering my details, I found there was something like 50 different titles to choose from, but not one gender-neutral option. I felt pressured into using Mr. And despite telling them that I wanted women's glasses, I was ignored and taken to the men's section instead. And when I insisted that they listen to me, they acted shocked and a bit confused. And I found that same lack of recognition repeatedly, from booking hotels and museums to cinema tickets. It may seem such a small thing to you, whether it's Miss, Mr. or Mix, but if you're not visible in the world around you, you can't see yourself, and neither can anyone else. It means I'm starting to use a female title instead, just to make my life a little easier, because I'm not seen every day. 500,000 of us are not seen. Indifference also takes many other forms, such as being refused services because your driving licence doesn't match who you are, as I found out when I went to the post office to collect a parcel, as myself, but with my ID still showing me as male. And it's most present in healthcare. Officially, we have to wait more than 3 years to access treatment that is hugely out of step with international best practice. In reality, the wait for the London clinic is now so long that if you were referred today, it would take you more than 30 years to be seen. I was referred last year, which means I will be 80 when it's my turn. Assuming I'm still alive. Intolerance takes indifference, magnifies it, and actively uses it against us. The UK press are now producing more than 2 articles a day about transgender people. Articles that sometimes hide behind reasonable language to peddle misinformation, half-truths, and yes, outright lies, such as 50 kids a week sent to sex change clinics. It's a manufactured moral panic, exactly like they did to gay people in the 1980s. And almost every UK political party is hostile to us, with politicians across the board agitating to remove rights that we have had for half a century, while party leaders do nothing. There are no openly transgender people in positions of influence anywhere in the UK. No MPs, no judges, no leaders of public bodies, boardrooms, nor the media. And as a result of this hostile environment, hate crimes against us have skyrocketed. I started my transition about 5 years ago, and I was definitely not prepared for the amount of hate I got for wearing nail varnish when I was seen as male. And despite how I appear today, I am still subjected to frequent comments and looks of disgust. All because the press dehumanises in the pursuit of profits, and politicians do it in the pursuit of power. It's psychological abuse on an industrial scale. I clearly remember the very first time I came across a transgender person. It was the early 1980s, and it was an article about Caroline Cossey, who was in the movie For Your Eyes Only. I was almost 11 years old, and I'd felt different for most of my childhood. But I couldn't name why. That headline proclaimed James Bond's girl was a boy. The very first time I saw someone like me, it was portrayed as being so unacceptable, so shameful, that I hid who I was for the next 35 years. The dehumanisation we live with is so pervasive that we internalise it, dehumanising ourselves, often with terrible consequences. For me, that meant I buried my feelings so deeply that I didn't feel anything at all. That badly affected my life and my relationships, and it pushed me to the brink of suicide more than once. Around 40% of transgender people attempt suicide at some point in their lives, and that figure doubles if we're subjected to so-called conversion therapy. Try to imagine about half of Bristol being so dehumanised in their lives that suicide was the only option left. We need to rehumanise transgender people. And that's where all of us, starting here at TED, come in. There are 3 things that we can do, and they are universal to any human difference. The first is simply listen. Seek out the voices of transgender people and listen to what we say about ourselves, our lives, and our struggles. Get to know us as people, and you'll discover that being transgender is often the least interesting thing about us. I've always wanted to write a novel, but instead I'm having to constantly justify my very existence. The second is believe. Now, this may come as a surprise, but the only experts on being transgender are transgender people. We frequently know more than the doctors, and definitely more than any journalist, politician, author, or academic. All we ask is that you take us at our word when we tell you who we are, and to treat us accordingly. Listen and believe. Just those two simple things can make our lives measurably better. Using a trans person's chosen name can reduce suicide attempts by an astonishing 65% by establishing recognition and acceptance. And that leads to positive impacts on self-image, self-esteem, and confidence. So call me Claire. It's that simple. And being seen as Claire, as who I am, changed me from someone who could barely speak in front of 10 people that I knew, to someone who can stand before you all today, proud of who I am. To address intolerance, however, we need challenge. Challenge your own thinking to see us as who we are, not who you think we are. Instead of telling us how brave we are, challenge yourselves to create a world where we can live without it being an act of bravery, where I can open the front door without being attacked, or I can go shopping without being abused just for being me. Challenge yourselves to include us, to create space in your lives that is welcoming and supportive, that doesn't put limits on who we are. But most of all, loudly challenge those who believe that we shouldn't be allowed to exist with the same rights, dignity, and respect as everyone else. Show them that you won't stand by while they try to eliminate us completely from society. Look past the fact we're transgender and see our humanity instead. Embrace the simple, radical idea that transgender people are people, because we're here to stay. My name is Claire.